Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of GCS Connect Leaders Series. Really interesting conversation today with Ben Putley from Alkimi Exchange. He's the CEO and co-founder. Alkimi Exchange is a really interesting company. They are disrupting the advertising industry using blockchain, creating an exchange to really shake up the way kind of ads are bought and exchanged using tokens. And they're in their development phase at the moment. So they've been probably going for about 12 months and the product is starting to go live over the coming months. And I really like speaking to leaders at this point in their development because they've learned so much and they're really thinking about how their product is working. So I think you really get that from this conversation. We talk through how blockchain can just be disruptive, how the community of blockchain works, and also how a business is kind of put together and started from those kind of seed organizations. And we really hope that Alkimi goes on to be a great success. So here we are. It's Ben Putley from Alkimi Exchange. Thank you. Hi there, Ben. How are you?
Very well, thanks. How are you doing?
Very well. Welcome to the GCS Connect Leaders Series.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Yeah, thank you.
For those who are listening, obviously we've got Ben here from Alkimi Exchange. He'll take you through what Alkimi do in more detail. Hopefully explain it to me as well. Very interesting, very cutting edge stuff. But we've got the CEO and co-founder here from Alkimi Exchange, Ben Putley. Ben, you're really in that kind of development process of your business at the moment. Can you want to tell us a little bit more, just so people can understand what Alkimi Exchange do?
Yeah, for sure. So there's the story, I guess, was we were trying to think of a name perhaps in October last year, and this idea that Alkimi was creating something from nothing really struck us because we've been fortunate enough to be incubated by a technology company called Constellation Network. So they're based out in the USA, and we're actually using their infrastructure to host the Alkimi Exchange in the future when the development starts in Q3. But what they really kind of push, and they've created a new term, which is this idea of a datapreneur. So data for them and for us actually is going to be the new oil. And the issue with data right now is that it's quite often siloed. It's very difficult to be interoperable, which is an issue that Constellation solve. And then by proxy, we will solve for the advertising issue. So industry rather. So there's this idea of through something that already exists, although it was really nothing, we've kind of created something which kind of gave us this idea for the name Alkimi. And we are an exchange. So we will facilitate the digital buying and selling of ads on the internet. So Nike might sell or want to buy an ad unit that's on CNN, for example. They do that typically at the moment through independent ad exchanges. So people like the Trade Desk, Xandr, Verizon, AOL provide this ability to buy and sell ads in real time, although those systems are all centralized. So what we're doing is decentralizing that, putting it on the blockchain, because there's a host of benefits that come along with that. So the blockchain itself is completely transparent. There's an immutable record. You have instant reconciliation of payments across the network. And that, particularly for advertising, which can be very opaque at times, is going to be compelling for everyone involved in that ecosystem, because they can now see exactly where their ad went, who saw it, who sold it, who bought it, to kind of give that complete picture, which is actually very difficult for them to see at the moment.
So they'll be able to kind of really track what's kind of happening, what's going on. You feel that, because really it's based on technology, but the idea is that it gives the customer a better experience, right?
Exactly that. So there's an issue at the moment, and you may have seen it on your iPhone, where some apps are now asking if you allow them to track you or not. And what Apple has done there is remove the ability for third parties to see which apps you're using, where you went before, where you went after, which allows them to provide targeted messaging in app. And that's hugely important for third party providers. Apple know that. So kind of walked back that ability for third parties to do that, to kind of protect their garden, as it were. And Google are actually going to follow suit. So Chrome is one of the most widely used browsers in the world right now. And as of 2022, cookies are going to disappear. And a cookie is basically an alphanumeric key that follows you around the internet for 30 days, storing which websites you went to and which websites in the past, where you clicked. And you'll probably have noticed it if you've ever put a pair of trainers in your basket on ASOS or something, and they've then followed you around the internet for the next 30 days. That is a cookie, basically. So it's trying to get you retargeted with an ad because of the behavior you've shown. And that has really underpinned the entire advertising industry to date, right? So that's been the best part of 20 years that cookies have been in effect since the internet existed, really.
Yeah. And obviously and we've had a few podcasts recently where they've talked about data and protecting data and that experience as a user, but also protecting that data, making it more difficult to have these tools. Potentially, one hurts an industry which has grown up around it, but also means that the services that you might get through kind of online algorithms, online connections are less, right? So I guess it's finding that balance, isn't it, between the two, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's been, I won't say reckless abandon online, but you could characterize it as that, right? And we have, as a populace, really just given up responsibility of our data. So like we've given it to centralized platforms, we've given it to Google, to Facebook, to ASOS, to Mr. Porter, whoever it may be, right? And you could really take the view that the last 20 years has been the world's greatest data leak. I mean, you only have to look at your inbox of messages right now to see that someone's trying to defraud you or get you to put in your bank details. And there's a larger issue at hand, which is sovereignty of data, right? So there's going to be a moment in time, probably very soon, as a lot of companies, I mean, we talked to one called Inrupt, which are providing a decentralized ID solution where you and I will take control of our data and be in charge of who gets to see it, in exactly the same way you are with your PIN code, with your passwords. Exactly that, right? And it's just that there just seems to be that this total lack of regard for what happens online, and fraud is a big thing, particularly now. Like, I think everyone's susceptible to fraud. It's just how busy you are when that call comes in, and have they passed your first immediate test? If they do, that's how people get defrauded, right? There's no one particular type of person that gets defrauded. It's situational for me. So by safeguarding that in the future, you will, as a user, when using the internet, be able to take back a lot of control. There's no reason. I mean, we at Alkimi Exchange believe that there is an intended value exchange of the internet, whereby you and I might visit a website for free content. We know that content has to be paid for. So an advertiser uses the audience on the publisher's website to show a relevant ad in exchange for some revenue. And that whole thing can kind of tick on quite nicely. Unfortunately, that's broken right now. So any website you go on, there'll be an interstitial that drops in that says, we're going to track you. And then you click no. So then there's less addressable users. So a publisher has to show more ads, has to use more intermediaries, which means there's more potential for data to be leaked, for fraud to happen, for performance to decrease, for revenues to decline. And then an advertiser has less addressable audience. They have lower performing ads. They're getting less return on their ad spend. And you and I are annoyed because we're seeing 5 to 10 ads a page. We all know the websites that are particularly bad for this. When your laptop fan starts whirring all of a sudden, it's broken now, right? And you could say that the reason that the proof that it's broken is regulations like the GDPR, like CCPA in America and California, where
people are kind of spraying and praying in some ways, just put adverts out everywhere just to see.
Exactly that. And it's that those regulations, in my opinion, have been very heavy-handed and kind of lent into the people that already have huge pools of first-party data. So again, Facebook, Google, Amazon there, because the targeting they have is so powerful that people think their phone's listening to them. But my hot take, I don't know for certain, I can probably tell you they aren't, but the process of transferring analog audio to binary code is very, very process intensive, right? What you don't realize is that you use your single sign-on for Facebook on Spotify, on any other website you can think of, and you've probably Googled something that you've told your friend about. Therefore, in your ad, in your stream, pops up an Instagram ad for the jumper you just told your friend about, right? You're like, holy shit, they're listening.
I have done a few tests on that sometimes. In fact, I once did it on green tea.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
like kind of just something completely random.
Yeah.
Talking about green tea. And we think in our house it comes through the Alexa. So
Yeah,
basically,
potentially.
we said, right, we're going to sit with the Alexa, and we're going to talk on the Alexa, and we're going to talk about green tea for about 10 minutes, me and my wife. And then, interestingly, on her phone, on Instagram, came up some adverts of green tea, and we were like, this is just crazy. But like you said, like you don't actually know how they do it, but obviously
Yeah.
they've got your data, they know how it works. And in the end, like quite often it happens that you've been talking about something, and then something comes up in the advert, and like you said, it's targeted, and you're like, actually, that's quite interesting because I do actually want that thing now. So then you're like clicking on it and buy it. So, like you said, it's much more targeted. Obviously, I didn't want any green tea at the time, but sometimes I do want the things that come up. And I think, for me, it is finding that balance. And you obviously believe that the kind of the blockchain technologies can really help to drive that balance, in that we will have more control, but also there'll be more visibility, as it were, for advertisers and for users, right?
Exactly that. And also just the huge issue facing everything outside of Facebook and Google, right? So they own 50-60% of the market.
Yeah.
The rest of us are fighting over 38%. And there's probably 200-300 companies that will provide a service that are looking to gain that section of 38% of a $500 billion industry, let's say. And what that has resulted in is this ad tech tax, right? So for every dollar an advertiser has, they're going to lose a significant percentage of that before the publisher ever sees it, through server discrepancies, through fraud, through opaque margins, through undisclosed fees, through disclosed fees, through disclosed revenue shares. And what that is doing is hurting the people that provide value in the chain, which is, for me, publishers, users, and advertisers. So the blockchain, yes, definitely solves for more transparency, more reportability, immutability of data, future products to be built on top of that. But for us, it's going to return more yield into the ecosystem, which then should help publishers invest in their businesses again. I mean, I spent, my previous company was a company called The Fifth, which is an influencer agency, but that was owned by News UK, and print has been declining, which has been kind of a bastion of their revenue for a long time. And it's not public knowledge, but they make redundancies, right? And it's like they're not able to reinvest in that kind of way that you would if there was more money that came in all of a sudden, because there's whole departments dedicated to managing these third parties that are creating this ad tech tax at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that, I mean, technology is all about disruption. It's all about continuing innovating. But if you look at the history of technology and how it works, it's usually a kind of a move towards bigger, then a move towards more open, and then it kind of goes backwards and forwards, a little bit like politics in some ways, kind of the right and the left, isn't it? So obviously the technology side is really, really interesting for us. But also the thing that really interests me from these conversations is really about the kind of the leadership that you're obviously showing in driving something disruptive, right? So trying to kind of shake up the market, which is really, really exciting. So, for yourself, what are the significant challenges that you've found doing this? I mean, I think it's, as you said, you were having those conversations back in, it's June, nearly June 2020. You wouldn't think so from the weather, Ben, but it is June 2020.
Yeah, tell me about it.
You've been having this since 2021. You've been having these conversations since autumn 2020. So what are those real significant challenges that you've found in the last 12 months in putting this together, in shaking up the tree?
I think it was just, it's one of those things where, like, I think forever, I used to do this with public speaking, actually. And if I ever had the chance to do public speaking, before I even had the chance to say no, I would say yes, because I knew it would be good for me. And that's really what I applied to this. It's like there was a real kind of penny drop moment for us. So Constellation have been building this amazing project, and then they launched one in particular, which is called the Lattice Exchange. So this was a decentralized exchange for buying and selling cryptocurrencies, essentially.
Yep.
And a lot of their kind of rhetoric around it was that the more transactions we have, the better. Our system can scale horizontally. And I was like, what do I know that has lots of transactions? And it is digital ad market, right? There's a publisher may have worldwide, 5-6 billion ad impressions available in a month. So that is a significant amount of transactions that hide in plain sight. Essentially, people won't often realize the complexity, the depth, and the revenue in the advertising market, even though it appears on your screen pretty much every day. So it was, for me, I spoke to my good friend Shorty, co-founder as well. He kind of got me onto the project in the first place, and I was like, is this what I think it was? And he was like, yeah, I totally think so. And then took it to Neil, my other co-founder, who's worked in agencies for the best part of 7 or 8 years, and he was banging this drum back in 2017. And he was like, yeah, I think that's good. So for me, it was like, okay, I've got 2 people that I trust. They're agreeing with what I'm saying. It's definitely risky, but it was that same approach to public speaking, right? It was like, going to say yes before I can even say no. And we just,
I like that.
left.
I'm going to use that as a kind of, we'll make that a headline.
Yeah. I mean, I also, like, what I've realized, I actually got diagnosed with ADHD towards the end of last year, and that's helped me understand myself actually quite a bit more than I ever have done, frankly, which I think has been huge in being allowing to get to this point where I am today. But it's, for me in particular, this is something that I have to be very careful and temper with, is that the risk is sometimes the reward for me. So like taking that risk was like, okay, this is great now. But then the other amazing part about having ADHD is this obsessive focus I have on stuff that I love. And at the moment, it will be for the foreseeable future, is Alkimi Exchange, is how can we come into a mature, arguably turgid market that needs solving, because advertising pays for journalism, and a free press is kind of a bastion of free speech at the end of the day. And it's like, okay, they need revenues to be able to tell the stories in the right way they should be, which you could argue has been let slide a little bit over the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah. And do you find, I mean, the way you overcome those challenges yourself as a leader, if you're the leader, was it important for you to have those 2 people around you? Are they kind of, sounding boards? Is it kind of even it out in terms of the personalities, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. It's like we always say, Neil and I'd say are very similar. We're probably kind of the most salesy of the 3 of us, and we are quite good at throwing up a wireframe very quickly, and then Charlie will come in and just add all of the color to make sure that we haven't made a mistake, we haven't tripped over ourselves anywhere. It does make sense logically. So we have found that through working with each other now for like the past 6 months or so, we fall into quite a nice step. We rely on each other, we're very honest with each other, and I think that's key, particularly with a small team in a disruptive industry. We trust each other implicitly. We always, even if we argue, if we sometimes fall out, we all know that we all have our best intentions of each other and the business. So we kind of are striving towards this one cause. And that was one thing that we were very keen to do, was establish this vision, which is very, very lofty, and then kind of work our way back to individual steps and not get too overwhelmed by this changing the advertising world, re-establishing the value exchange on the internet. But it's like, okay, I need to email this person today. I need to follow up with that person today. I need to do this document today, which sets me up for tomorrow, which is then leads me into the following day and the following day. And if we keep doing that, we should get to where we set out to go in the first place.
So that's quite interesting. So that's really you looking at, like you said, these lofty ideals, but still concentrating on the kind of day-to-day activity, rather than, I guess, you can get too caught up in disruption and actually forget that you're running a business or you've got tasks.
Exactly that. It's something I'd learned from software sales, right? It was like, I need to hit $1 million a year, right? And I would work it back to stuff I could do every day. And it's like, okay, if I send 10 emails a day, it's likely I'll get five meetings a week. From those 5 meetings, it'll probably yield 1 proposal. If I do that 4 times a month, I have 4 proposals. 1 of those will hit. It might be X amount. And that is kind of the step up to getting to where you need to be. So it's like, I think once you've set the plan and you've really dug into it. So like, one of the things that we always preach to each other is to unconfirm your bias, if you will. It's very easy to go out and find 10 articles that agree with exactly the way you think about something. It's very difficult personally to go and prove yourself wrong, but it's such a valuable process, because if you can't find 5, 6, 7, 8 things that are proving you wrong, you're probably starting to find what is the beginnings of quite a good idea. So it's like, don't go and find stuff that proves you right. Go find something that's going to prove you wrong. It's going to derail everything. And if you can't, then okay, you're probably in a good spot.
I think that I read somewhere, I think it was Elon Musk, who obviously sells quite a lot.
Yeah.
He said that whenever his friends are reviewing something, he always says to them, "What don't you like?" Because generally your friends will say, yeah, it's pretty good, I liked it, because they want to be nice.
Exactly,
so if you try to push someone to say, look, what actually did you not like? That's a much better place to start off from. So even if it's like, look, I'm really racking my brains, but this is the bit I didn't like, it helps you, doesn't it, to identify the bits you need to work on, right?
Absolutely, because it's someone has a slightly different perception, has a different experience of something. And again, my degree was in product design, so that was kind of hammered into me from an early age, was to create products for people, make stuff user-centric, because if you're not, you're basically creating sculptures, right? It's kind of a manifestation of your idea that you think people might like, but ultimately it's you expressing yourself in what is just art. Whereas building a product's actually very, very different. You have to go out, ask someone what they like or don't like, and if it's wrong, it's wrong. Like, don't be precious about these things. Like, you can be precious sometimes you're pot committed with these things, but really you have to just take feedback on its merit a lot of the time, and be careful who you ask feedback for, right? Because I quite often speak to my father and he gives me some feedback, but then you always have to temper that with that slightly different, because he's different to me, he's from this different era, but equally he has very good insights on certain things. So like for us, what we've really been working on recently is like establishing a good advisory board that have different skill sets in different areas, to kind of challenge us on what they're experts on, so that we learn. I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed the most, is particularly in the last 3 months, is how much we've learned. Like this is a very nascent market in itself, and in particular this technology we're using is only 18 months old, right? So we really are at the cutting edge of what we think is going to be the next iteration of blockchains that will be used globally. And the Department of Defense have done their due diligence on Constellation Network, and if it's good enough for those guys, I'm sure we can use it to serve a few ads without wanting to be too.
Well, it's the driving force of the internet, isn't it? You talk about finance, and that's where blockchain has been used mostly, but the actual internet really is based on this, like you said, this transactional ad market, which is where the revenue is really created, isn't it? That most people go to the internet to find out about products which you then buy. So that's
exactly.
why we're there.
I always say, used to say, your mobile phone in itself is crazy, right? Like we did a bit of research at one of my previous employers' company called Sharethrough, and we interviewed, I think it was 100 or so millennials, that if they had the choice of would they rather lose their pinky finger forever, or lose their phone forever, and 2 out of 3 of them said they'd lose the finger rather than the phone, which I probably would as well, to be honest with you, because you get to the end of the night and you need to get an Uber home. I can't order that without my phone. I don't know my way around London to save my life. I can't do that without my phone. If I want to speak to my parents, it's through my phone. It's like it's become this hugely personal and intimate device.
This finger you're using.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Not that fair. The thumb would be hard. I'm not going to.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, if you lost the thumb, you couldn't open your phone anyway.
Yeah, that's right. We'd jump for them, would you? Yeah, and I think it's just it's very, very important. We kind of look at it and how we kind of move it forward. And we talk a lot at GCS about innovative companies, right? And it's great. You talk about learning. For me, this whole podcast series has been about learning from different people, different stages in their careers, different stages in their companies. But it always comes back to your kind of vision for the next 12 months, where you're taking the company, whether you're one of the biggest companies in the world or whether you're just about to start and you're developing. So what are your strategies for the kind of coming year? Are you thinking about that at this moment?
Yeah, so like one of the biggest challenges that we have is that we're kind of marrying 2 audiences together with largely different skill sets, right? So we're raising money through a token sale. So that's a crypto audience, right? And then you have the advertising audience, which will be using the product, right? So the token provides utility for the ad world, and they don't currently play together too much at the moment. So for us, the next 12 months, a lot of our efforts are going to be educating those two communities, helping advertisers understand blockchain, helping blockchain understand advertising, and the way those things can marry together, and really just then opening it up. We want to be a company that works with everyone. I think one of the things that has been successful to a point but is now holding the industry back is this kind of centralization and siloing of data and knowledge to one degree or another, right? And it's like, we are all going to do better if we have this kind of idea of and this is the Japanese term, but it's a karetsu, right? So like, it's the rising tide raises all ships. So like, you have companies like Mitsubishi that aren't just creating motors, they're creating pens, they're involved in electricity and gas, and if they're successful, it helps all other sectors, right? And that's largely been lost. So it's kind of ushering in this idea of what essentially is a generative economic model, where you're not extricating resource, you're adding resource and then getting also rewarded in resource for doing so. And like, as I said, everyone wins. Well, that's the plan, right?
And do you think, I mean, because I was going to kind of move on to that, because obviously the growth comes in from, like you said, marrying two, you know, the blockchain world with the tokens that is raising funds, and then marrying it with the area that you're trying to disrupt and hopefully help, which doesn't know anything about it. Or maybe some people do, but generally it's I don't really understand how that works. Hopefully things like this podcast might help, so you can kind of send those. And
I'd also say that's okay, right? Like, I think particularly Brits are quite reluctant to ask a question. I think, like, from my experience in public speaking, you go and speak in the US, right? And you normally have 10, 15 questions to fill at the end, right? Because they've just been brought up, I guess, to challenge more through the schooling system. And you get less of that in the UK. And I think that even to this day, I have meetings in my diary. I'm not 100% sure what this service this person's offering. It's often quite a serious conversation, and I have to be very stoic on the call. Like, yeah, totally get it. I understand what you're doing, kind of have a different mindset. And then I get off the call and I walk out of the office and speak to my girlfriend. I'm like, what just happened? That was crazy. Let me just kind of tell you what they're offering and just like really decompress offline. But that, I mean, again, that's fine. I think you have to be able to do that. You have to have humility. You have to be able to listen to what people are saying a lot of the time, but also be prepared to make a mistake. As long as it's not careless and you've done it in mistakes been made in earnest, you quite often learn a bit more from doing that anyway, right? So there needs to be I don't want to sound too preachy, but like kind of a lesser fear of failure, right? Like, I've taken the jump, I left my role. It's scary. I'm scared, right? But equally, this is all I want to be doing. It gets me out of bed. So like, it's that risk and reward again, right? Which keeps me excited for sure.
And so kind of coming back to that element of disruption and changing people's opinion. When you think about kind of going, and maybe you've obviously had some successes already with some kind of ad agencies and some publishing houses. What's this kind of simple way that you're using to get them interested, to get them involved in this process?
I think one of the things we're most excited about is that what we're offering is totally interoperable with what currently exists. Right. So all digital ads are sold using a standard which is called OpenRTB 2.5. So it's contributed to by a number of individuals. It's largely open source, and we're able to inherit that onto our exchange.
Okay.
Whilst using all of the benefits of blockchain in the future. So it's really a case of, you wouldn't know you were using the blockchain when you work with Alkimi Exchange, other than you can see where your ad money's been going. You can see who bought it. You can see instantly how much money you spent or made. You can know that no one can change that record. So it's solving a number of issues that are rife at the moment without having to change your current setup, which is just like, for me, the golden bullet, because why wouldn't you? It's cheaper, it's better, it's more efficient. It has, at launch, will have parity to exchanges that exist at the moment. And then where we can go after that really is very, very exciting because of the amount of data we can handle on the exchange. And the beauty is, the more transactions there are, the quicker we get. It's kind of the beauty of being a horizontally scalable mechanism of consensus that we operate on the exchange.
So So another thing, I guess, that's important, particularly around content, is piracy and holding on to it. So what we're suggesting here is obviously you would be able to kind of own your content and control your content much better using something like this, rather than kind of letting it out and then you don't know where it goes and who's using it, and who's reproducing it without those. Maybe
yes and no. So like it's like there's publishers largely keep their editorial slots and content under lock and key, but they will let advertisers sit in between those pieces of content, right? Which it can go badly in instances, right? Like there's been a few terrible instances that I've experienced in the past. We have the wrong ad on the wrong website and you have a very angry call in the morning, but it's when that happens, it's nearly always retrospective. So like that exact situation happens where you get a call, it's like, where's this ad come from? Is it you? We pause everything. And like that is not beneficial in terms of revenue. It's not beneficial in terms of the perception of that site in front of their audience. It's something that needs to be addressed. And what we can do is preemptively block that by creating rules which are enforced by the network protocol that prevent any buyers from ever accessing your inventory before they're even got on it. So it kind of saves that panicked phone call, as it were, and the kind of the mess that can unfold afterwards.
Yeah. So you're looking at kind of changing that industry, moving that forward, disrupting, and obviously, as you grow and as you become more successful, you'll be leading a bigger company. From
fingers crossed. Yeah,
that's the idea, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
What sort of advice would you give to, on the kind of talent side, to candidates applying for your company? Someone kind of joining this at the start of a journey. What type of person are you looking for?
I think one of the things that I loved about kind of discovering blockchain crypto is that all the information is already out there, right? You don't have to go to university. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to really have any qualifications per se. You have to have an understanding. You have to have a want to understand. You have to be diligent and careful, because there is a lot of misinformation out there for sure. There's people that want to take your money, right? Which can happen. We've all seen the stories on the news, right? And I think it's just that kind of the willingness to kind of take a risk, but then once you've taken that risk, just really be comfortable with it and learn. Because like a lot of what I learned is from Twitter, frankly. Like I learned all about crypto through Twitter, right? And that's what I find incredible, is that I was able to largely teach this myself just through like spare time and passion. And then what I've been even more enamored by is that there's this, like, it seems to be that if you get into the right circles, there's a real value in the handshake and like a trusted introduction, which I guess is lost a little bit in traditional businesses. There's like introduction and you have to really verify, and there's kind of almost gone back to like a bartering type system, which I love. Like I've really enjoyed that. I've always been someone that goes by my gut quite a lot and can be quite empathetic at times. And it's like, hey, you get a good read of people and you take a risk and you get rewarded. It's just been really refreshing to kind of, and I guess largely my point, I've always wanted a seat at the table I thought I wanted to seat at, right? And it's like, I didn't realize there was this amazing table that most people can sit at, right? If you want to learn, you can get a seat at this table. It's only going to get bigger as this kind of gets more adopted. And that's rambling a little bit, but like I would say that's just, it's much more approachable than people might think if they can get over that initial hurdle of like, crypto sounds strange, really difficult to understand. It's like, there's more resources than I've seen on anything. Out there for free.
It's out there to learn, and what you really want, and the team you really want to create is who's got that kind of inquisitive spirit.
Yeah, because there'll be people that are more native to this than me, right? Like people that were born in the last 10, 20 years that are going to come into this industry, that are going to know more about it than I do because they've lived it more kind of natively than I have. And I want them to teach me, right? I want to be I will be there to guide if I can. We become that successful. But I've not ever worked in a sector that like just encourage, like everyone can get involved, right? It's really exciting. And I think quite often you're then very interesting to talk to, and then you get to like explain to your friend, and then you can then be like, it's been great for my confidence. It's been great for my general purpose day to day. It's just been like, if that sounds attractive to you, I think anyone listening, that this is the space to look into. I think, but be careful, and you can do it in your spare time, but there's a lot of information to learn, a lot of information available, and yeah, just get reading, basically, watching, listening, whatever it might be.
And for people that are listening that want to kind of, you know, think about different types of industries to disrupt using blockchain, what type of advice would you give them? You know, obviously don't be a competitor to Alkimi, but
Yeah.
what type of advice would you give them to do that learning, to think about their industry, to work through those processes?
I think if you work in anything involving any kind of data, which is largely everyone right now, there's an application for you. It's then about, there is a bit of lateral thinking that has to be involved, right? Because as you said earlier on, a lot of crypto-based projects have been around finance and derivatives and trading, which is very foreign to most people unless you have like worked in a bank or you fell into it through FX, let's say. But being able to draw parallels between the NHS is a good one, for example, right? So at the moment, when you go to the doctor, you have to follow your care almost. So like your records stay at your local surgery, and then you move, and they have to follow to find it, right? What could happen is that you have your NHS number and you maintain all your records, and for that to happen, there has to be a trusted means of sharing information, a secure way for you to store that information, and a way in which you can share it with the people that you need to, right? So like that's one application. I mean, I think about the issue at the border right now where there's queues to try and get across into Europe. That again could be a solution that's solved by a project like an NFT, for example. If you could NFT a lorry, you would know that it hasn't been tampered with. You could scan a number plate and over you go. There's no more traffic, which means there's no pollution, and there's like a whole load of other issues that then kind of get solved by proxy of that. So it's
part, in some ways, kind of speeding up the process of that data exchange. You know, if everyone trusts this is the case, then we all trust this platform, as it were, then things can be made easier then.
Pretty much, yeah. And it brings a veracity that's not often seen. Like once data's on the blockchain, you can't change it. It's widely agreed by everyone because it's been validated by a number of people that are responsible for validating transactions or whatever chain that may be on, right? So the sticking point can be that a smart contract on Ethereum is a bit like a dumb waiter. It's like, when this happens, do this. So one of the reasons we're so excited about Constellation, and to be honest with you, they do have an open application for projects. So if something has struck you with this conversation, you can submit a white paper and they will look at it. And that's how we got our project. We submitted our white paper. They were fortunate enough to get chosen, and here we are today, right? So it's what Constellation are able to do is make it slightly smarter. So that, like, if this happens, then do this or that. So kind of bring in some more of that familiar program logic to onboarding data from the real world to the online world, which then the applications for that really just go absolutely bananas, to be honest with you.
Sounds like it's the sort of thing you could do in recruitment quite a lot.
Yeah, I would say so. And I think the other thing that is quite key to say, and I've stolen this from Chorley, so I will credit him, but don't use blockchain for the sake of using blockchain. Like blockchain will be ubiquitous when you don't know you're using it, right? Because I don't really know how some technology works, but I don't need to. I just know that it works, right? And then that's where we need to get wide adoption, to get mass adoption, and usher in all the performance benefits and benefits in general that blockchain will bring.
Like you said at the start, the exchange itself on that open technology will appear the same. It's the heavy lifting that's going on behind that gives a better customer experience. It's not, well, buy this because it's using blockchain. You know, that's not the key thing, is it?
Exactly. And then the kicker is, you don't need to see it, but if you want to, you can see everything. You can see absolutely everything we've ever done, right? And that is very different, right? Because it can be difficult to get information out of some people sometimes, right? Just like it's hard to do. It's the databases aren't set up right, or a record's been lost, or a spelling mistake, or a typo, whatever it may be, right? There's a whole host of issues that can affect you accessing data, where this really does change that. I've been a technology fan my entire life, and it's like one of the most exciting bits of tech, I think, outside of a Nintendo 64, that I've ever really been excited
I don't
about.
think you can mess with Street Fighter 2 and stuff like that, can you?
Exactly, yeah.
but you know, you're at this point now, you know, the journey that you've been on in the last 6 months and as a leader, what do you think is the most important thing you've learned, you know, where you're at this moment, which is obviously a very exciting moment in your business?
That's a good question. I think what I've been blown away by actually is just like the sound a little bit OTT here, but the blockchain world is much more like a community than an audience, right? And like, you can speak to your audience, they'll listen to you, but it's very difficult to get feedback from your audience, right? Whereas if you have a community, yes, when things go badly, it will be worse, but equally when things go well, it goes much better, because you kind of decentralize the way you think, right? And when we launched the project, I think probably 3 weeks ago now, we have Telegram channels where we kind of seed information about the project. And when I first got into Constellation, I reached out to one of their admins, and he helped me get my foot in the door. He made the intro to the CSO at Constellation, who I pitched to, and then we ran through the project submission form. And he was the first person I called on to kind of be the head of our community lead, right? And he was able to bring in a team of 14 admins on day one, who then brought in 6 creative designers on day 2. So it's like, yes, my team, the core team is 4 of us, but we have a community now, people that we trust, that provide advice, that we don't pay, to be honest with you, that just do it because they understand the opportunity that's been ushered in. And that to me has been mind-blowing. There is like kind of a leap of faith that you have to take. This has kind of been our baby for a while now, and I trust these people to spread the message as we wish them to, and kind of promote the project and grow the community more to other like-minded individuals. And it blew my mind actually that people were willing to do that, wanted to do that, and did it earnestly, because it's not something you'd think would happen, right? Like, it's
no, I think a lot. I mean, what I see within the world, like open source, these collaborative communities, is there's a lot of help that goes on, you know, and I think maybe that's something we lost a little bit in capitalism over the last 100 years. It's kind of a war, wasn't it? You know, like the battle. Whereas you look at this now, and you know, we know from the companies when we recruit into these areas that we work with an open source community called RDK, and there's so much when software programmers share code to help each other out to do their jobs better, which seemingly goes against the idea of this kind of capitalism as a battle. But I agree, it's such an interesting way to work with it, and also it does seem to progress things forward, doesn't it? You know, it helps.
Absolutely, innovation. And I liken it a little bit to go into a gig. Like, I'm a huge gig fan, and largely because I think like humans are quite tribal animals anyway. Like, you evolve to just like speak to the people around you generally, and it's like, okay, Twitter changed that. So like all of a sudden you could speak to anyone in the world, and the people that would agree with you would reply, and the people that really disagreed with you would also reply. And that's how does that
it's
quite
the
work?
Pros and cons of Twitter, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, right. That's good for learning, and it's also bad for some things, right? But also you get that experience when you go to a gig, right? There's no other. I cannot wait to go back, to be honest with you, when that feeling when there's 5,000 people singing the same back song that you're singing, that means something to them. It's, there's just that good feeling that you get. And I can liken that to what I've experienced with the community that we found and the people we've worked with so far in the crypto world. So it's fantastic, actually. It's like, it's been really good, particularly after like everyone's been separated so much because of the pandemic, right? It's been good to kind of get that feeling of community back again, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree with you. I think it'll be even better when gigs are back.
Oh yeah.
So, because it was very good. So yeah, no, and for me, I think it's just really exciting to speak to someone in kind of the cusp at the start of their kind of company journey, as it were. You know, we'll watch obviously Ben with real kind of excitement and anticipation for what you guys do. And yeah, I'm sure if anyone's listening and they want to kind of reach out to Ben and find out more about what Alkimi are doing, either for you to help them, I guess, because we just said we're very helpful in this community, or to actually find out more about the product, then obviously they can kind of reach out on LinkedIn or whatever and kind of
go. We're on Twitter. We've got Telegram groups. You catch us in a number of different places, but yeah, this is my absolute favorite thing to talk about, and it's very hard to get me to stop talking. So yeah, I literally will speak to anyone, people in the street, the bus driver, whoever it may be. Just it's getting me to shut up, I think, is quite often the big problem.
Well, we've come to the end, so I'm going to have to get you to shut up now, Ben. But no, it's we might have a part 2 because I'm very, very interested in it. But thank you very much for your time today, Ben, and good luck with the kind of launch proper. Thank you very much.
It's been great. Thanks a lot for having me.
Cheers.